working for you on RTV6. From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
Controversial legislation curbing legal immigration. Problems put the brakes on school buses in one central Indiana city during the first week of class. But first, the field for the U.S. Senate race is growing. We're hearing directly from Representative Luke Messer for the first time on his decision to run. Messer says Hoosiers deserve a U.S. Senate campaign that is focused on the issues. He was asked about the tone of the rhetoric between him and Republican Congressman Todd Rokita, who hasn't formally announced his intent to run. Messer spoke briefly about his decision to enter the race after presenting a Sagamore of the Wabash Award last week.
Hoosiers deserve a U.S. Senator who's going to fight for them, not just talk Hoosier values back home in Indiana while voting with the liberal elite in Washington. We'll have many weeks and months to make that case, and we look forward to the opportunity.
Messer says he'll go into more detail on his decision during a formal announcement on Saturday. The jabs between Messer and Rokita have grabbed headlines and garnered criticism from some within their own party. Rokita announced his campaign finance team last month, but he has not yet formally announced his intent to seek the Senate seat. Two people who oversaw Trump's Indiana campaign have thrown their support behind the congressman. Another Republican is entering the primary for the U.S. Senate race. State Representative Mike Braun of Jasper confirms to me that he is planning a formal announcement for tomorrow or Tuesday. Braun says he thinks he offers an outside alternative. Senator Joe Donnelly is not expected to face any challengers in the Democratic primary next year. And this weekend, he has been back home in a familiar political setting. Donnelly was among those attending the annual Indiana Pork Producers Ham Breakfast that helps to kick off the Indiana State Fair. The Democrat was among the loudest voices in the recent fight over Republican efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act. But the senator tells RTV6 he uses his time to listen to voters.
I visit all 92 counties every year, all the towns, all the cities, and try to spend time getting the best ideas from back home. And I think that the best politics, the best politics is just simply doing your job well.
And as far as key issues, what types of things are you looking at going forward? You mentioned the Farm Bill.
Yeah, jobs, the opportunity for everybody to have a good job and a bigger paycheck, making sure that there's a few more bucks in everybody's wallet at the end of the year, making sure our economy continues to grow and keeping our nation safe.
Donnelly is expected to be among those working on a bipartisan effort to stabilize the health insurance markets. This past week, Republican Senator Lamar Alexander said his Senate Health Committee would soon begin hearings on that bill. The discussion over cold beer sales is expected to heat up again this fall. Rickers just released a 15-second ad on YouTube making its case for selling cold beer in its convenience stores.
Round and round it goes.
The ad meetings of the Alcohol Code Revision Committee. Republican leaders at the State House have said there will be a comprehensive review of all of the state's alcohol laws, including Sunday sales and the sales of cold beer. Rickers lost a battle with lawmakers this year when the legislature closed a loophole that allowed the company to sell cold beer after it added a restaurant component at one of its stores in Columbus. Some major new developments this week in the special investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. The Wall Street Journal reports special counsel Robert Mueller has impaneled a grand jury to investigate Russia's interference. The move could be a sign the investigation is gaining steam and will likely continue for months. CNN reported this week that federal investigators are now looking into President Trump's and his associates' financial ties to Russia. Insiders describe it as, quote, one of the most fertile avenues moving forward. The Justice Department is out with new measures to crack down on leaks. Some of those measures coming from the Director of National Intelligence, former Indiana Senator Dan Coates. This comes after President Trump blasted Attorney General Jeff Sessions for failing to rein in leaks. The latest information comes after the Washington Post published transcripts of private and contentious conversations between President Trump and foreign leaders.
I directed the National Security Division of the Department of Justice and our U.S. attorneys to prioritize cases involving unauthorized disclosures. The department will not hesitate to bring lawful and appropriate criminal charges against those who would abuse the public trust.
Sessions says the Justice Department has tripled the number of ongoing investigations of those leaking information to reporters. President Trump is backing legislation meant to reduce the number of legal immigrants in the country. The plan would essentially create a skills-based immigration system, putting a higher priority on immigrants who are high-skilled and who speak English. The plan faces an uphill fight in Congress. Several key Republicans oppose it, but one member who supports it is 3rd District Republican Congressman Jim Banks. The congressman released this statement calling the plan, quote, a common-sense approach that recognizes individual merit, protects American workers, and addresses our nation's economic needs. Our political insiders will weigh in on the week in Washington later on Indianapolis this week. Another huge story this week at the White House. Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci is out after 10 days. Sources say new Chief of Staff John Kelly told him he needed to resign, and he had him escorted off of the White House grounds on Monday. A couple of weeks ago, he had unleashed a vulgar tirade against 2 top officials. In the midst of all of this, President Trump tweeted, "There is no chaos in the White House." Vice President Mike Pence is coming back home to Indiana this week. Pence is scheduled to serve as the keynote speaker for the 10-Point Coalition's annual luncheon on Friday. We're told Pence will spend time getting a first-hand look at the group's mission to lower violence in Indianapolis's neighborhoods. Later that day, Pence will attend the unveiling of his official governor's portrait at the State House. The ceremony will be a public event. Another Hoosier is joining the Trump administration. The former director of Indiana's State Department of Health has been confirmed as the 20th United States Surgeon General. Dr. Jerome Adams announcing his confirmation on Twitter. He had served as director of Indiana's State Department of Health since 2014. The VA is taking new steps to improve access to health care. The VA plans to use video technology and diagnostic tools for exams with an emphasis on care in rural areas. Veterans will be able to schedule appointments on their mobile devices. The Highland Park neighborhood is celebrating 1 year without a homicide. People who live near 29th and Capitol are taking a stand against crime. They're joining the 10-Point Coalition and Metro Police to discuss how individuals are making a difference. 27-year-old Cullen Hubbard was shot to death in the neighborhood 1 year ago.
You don't have to accept the level of violence in your neighborhood. I want to encourage all neighborhoods all over the city to partner with police and other community stakeholders and faith-based groups.
IMPD says residents can contact their local police district headquarters to be part of a local citizens community council. Our RTV6 digital team has been digging into homicide numbers for Highland Park. Our investigators found that going a year without a homicide is not uncommon there. In fact, since the start of 2011, the neighborhood has gone on average 400 days between homicides. There wasn't a single homicide in Highland Park between 2007 and 2012. To beat that 400-day average mark, Highland Park will have to get to September 9th without a homicide. The man accused of murdering a Southport police lieutenant is scheduled to make his first court appearance this week. 2 previous hearings for 28-year-old Jason Brown have been pushed back because he is still in the hospital. He's charged with murder in the deadly shooting of Lieutenant Aaron Allen on July 27th. Coming up next on Indianapolis this week, we're a year out from the vote, and the Republican primary race for the Senate is already hot. Our political insiders will talk about that in all of this week's Washington News coming up next.
In this station.
And we're welcomed now by our RTV6 political insiders, Republican Abdul Hakim Shabazz, Democrat Kip 2, and Eric Berman of WIBC. Thank you for coming back and joining us again. The jabs back and forth between Congressman Rokita and Messer. Will voters remember this? We're so far out from the primary. Do you think it hurts?
From all the conversations I've had, it's not the voters that aren't so much paying attention, but the political class is. The donors, excuse me, the county chairman, and they're all expressing concerns about this back and forth, that if it's, August, July, and these guys are beating up on each other this much, what does this do, come February, March? And does this create an opening, for somebody like a Mike Braun who's going to get in the race, or maybe a Curtis Hill, or maybe a Mike Delph, to come in, because these guys are just so much beating up on each other?
Yeah, I don't think they end up remembering this per se. The political class, as Abdul mentioned, might, but they're going to have to remember because the congressmen are going to remind voters of it in February and March and April. What this is telegraphing their punches. It's going to be a no-holds-barred negative primary campaign, and you can expect the airwaves to be reprising what we're hearing now and more.
They seem to be behaving like a couple of frat brothers for competing
for Wabash,
for competing tournaments at Wabash. Yes, as a matter of fact, there was a column this week that I think is right. Is they're not acting like adults, and they're not acting like they ought to be United States senators. But when you have a United States president who acts like an infant, then I suppose that's where we are these days.
But also, I do think too, what this makes life a lot easier for Joe Donnelly, because Joe Donnelly doesn't have to really do anything. I'll just take the clips from, what Messer said about Rokita, what Rokita said about Messer, and notice my commercial. Didn't this guy's unhinged, or this person didn't live in the home. I mean, they're basically writing the Democratic playbook for next year.
We've already gotten a sense of where everyone stands on fundraising. In terms of some of the Trump folks lining up behind Rokita, and then some of the Pence folks lining up behind Messer, how does that dynamic play out?
I think the big thing that comes out of that might be not so much the money, not even so much the votes, but the mailing list. For Rex Early and Tony Samuel to come out last week with that letter on Todd Rokita's behalf, and, well, we're not endorsing, but this is really the most Trump loyalist congressman, and it was everything short of an endorsement. What that really says is they've got a mailing list which they can roll out of a lot of Trump supporters from last year's campaign. That gives them a direct pipeline into a source of support. It's not decisive, but it's certainly something you like to have in your corner.
I'll make a prediction now. In October of 2018, the Republican nominee for the United States Senate will be running away from Donald Trump, not running towards Donald Trump. It'll be interesting to watch. That's my prediction.
I think that's right.
I would not be surprised. I mean, but the thing is, you still got to remember though, Trump is still incredibly popular.
No, here. Only among Republicans. He's underwater.
But underwater. But to get to a Republican primary, these are the people who are going to be coming out, and that's why I think it's it's sort of that fine line that these guys are going to have to walk, which is how do you endear yourself to the Trump supporters, but now you've got a broader electorate that you're going to have to pivot and reach to, and there are a lot of Republicans, particularly Marion and Hamilton County, that are not crazy about Donald Trump, and those folks will actually be the ones who make the final call as to which one of these gentlemen ends up getting a nomination.
And if that ends up being the case, that could be good news for Joe Donnelly, because you've got a rerun of 2012 when he won the first time. You had the Lugar Republicans who weren't happy about how that primary played out and just never quite came home to Richard Murdoch, even before the whole
God-intended comment.
The whole God-intended comment. Even before that, Richard Murdoch was struggling to get a lead in that race, and that was just the final nail in the coffin.
I think that's exactly right, and I think that's the dynamic we're seeing happen. And I think Curtis Hill's going to exploit that opening, but whoever gets in is going to try to out-Trump each other, and I'm not talking about Euchre.
Pivoting to the White House and the impaneling of a grand jury, what does this tell you about the status of this investigation, where things stand?
Well, it tells you that he's got enough evidence to go to a grand jury. I'm not sure it tells us anything beyond that. It tells us that we've reached a phase of the investigation where we've got enough that we're ready to take this to a body that might be able to file charges.
I think the tell is what the president's speech Thursday night in West Virginia, where he was unhinged again and talking about everything was being fake, and he's clearly worried about it. He's trying to set the table for none of this is legitimate. Of course, Republicans are pushing back. They are not allowing any recess appointments during their break. They are writing legislation to protect Robert Mueller. They've had enough of this president, at least privately and with the procedures that they're engaged in the United States Senate. So the bottom is starting to drop out on this president, and it's going to continue.
And something important to keep in mind, which I think is most important, is very difficult to fire somebody once a grand jury has been impaneled. Good luck firing the special counsel or special prosecutor, whatever title you want to give him, after a grand jury has been impaneled. That is not going to look good, and it doesn't help. And like Kip said, Republicans are already sort of putting the political bolts on the doors. No recess appointments. You can only fire Robert Mueller for a specific cause. They're already sort of building their own. Talk about building the wall. They're already building their own wall in case all this thing goes south.
We've heard the term civil war being used to describe affairs within the White House. Latest departures in the last week. What does it tell you? We've got a minute left.
Well, let's put it this way. I was in D.C. for a layover coming back to Indianapolis. I had 2 hours. That was enough time for me to leave the airport, go to the White House, apply for a communications director job, get the job, get fired, get back to the airport, and back here in Indianapolis. That's just how ridiculous things are there. What?
We knew he was going to tell you. Look, it's chaos. It's proof again that Donald Trump wasn't ready for the job, and he's still not ready for the job. I don't think he knows what he's he's doing. He didn't know what he's doing, and I don't know that Michael Flynn's going to fix anything.
Eric, last word.
John Kelly's getting good reviews in his first week. The part that fascinates me about this is Reince Priebus, who lost his job as chief of staff, is as responsible as anyone for Donald Trump getting the nomination. When you had a tipping point after the Indiana primary where the opposition was crumbling, Donald Trump seemed to have a stranglehold, that was the point where the national chairman got to decide, okay, is the party going to accept an outsider, or is the party going to say, no, we're going to see you at the convention, we're going to fight this out? He threw in his lot with the Trump campaign. It turned out to be a winning strategy for the party, not a winning strategy 6 months later for Reince Priebus.
Okay, thank you all. Conversation will continue. Coming up, a transportation nightmare. Muncie schools closed its doors last week because of major issues figuring out how to get kids to school. What the district is doing to fix the problem in time for tomorrow. And it's fair time here in Indiana for the second straight year. The fair train is not running, though, and it may never run again. The controversial decision and what will likely replace the train in Hamilton.
Weekday mornings at 9 on RTV 6.
This week, a Hoosier was killed less than a month into his first tour of duty in Afghanistan. The body of Columbus native Jonathan Hunter is now back on American soil. The 23-year-old was killed in a suicide bombing along with another service member on Wednesday. He graduated from Columbus East High School, where he played football. He had just spoken to his father a week ago, expressing his pride for serving his country. His dad tells RTV6 how family and friends will remember him.
His loving heart. He always put other people first. I mean, that's just the way he was, and that's the way he was raised. I mean, if you was down, he brought you up.
Jonathan is survived by his wife, Whitney. The two were just weeks away from celebrating their first anniversary. Roadblocks during the first week of school in Muncie. The school district canceled classes Thursday and Friday after dealing with major busing issues. Parents flooded the phones at the district office on the first day of school, saying their child was dropped off at the wrong location, the bus was late, or it never showed up at all. The difficulties come within a few months of the district shutting down 3 schools due to falling enrollment and significant budget deficits.
I thought they would be more prepared for this beginning of the school year, you know, like go out and train and go on these routes, and I was totally disappointed.
The district is assessing the situation with the hope of resuming classes tomorrow. The Indiana State Fair is underway, but there is no State Fair train, and it looks like the wheels have hit the brakes for good. The Fishers mayor says the Nickel Plate Trail will officially replace the rail line between Fishers and Noblesville. The rails between the two cities will be converted to a pedestrian trail.
Having a world-class pedestrian amenity like the Nickel Plate Trail is really something that Fishers residents would want to see. We've heard time and time again that trails are so important to our residents' quality of life, and to have that corridor, have that opportunity to link Noblesville and Fishers and Indianapolis together it's an exciting opportunity.
Converting the rails to a trail is expected to cost more than $9 million. The train tracks will remain in place from Noblesville north. Coming up next, Lauren Casey in with 6 things you need to know that are happening.
Rallies and checkers. Fast foodies know the deal.
Well, any scattered showers that were to the west this morning now going to be moving in during the course of the day, especially into this afternoon and evening. There you see TrueCast calling for those showers, mainly afternoon. Also, once we get into about midnight or maybe overnight, and this is probably going to carry us into early Monday as well before we finally wrap everything up and get into Tuesday, when we can finally see the temperatures return to more August-like numbers. Temperatures today don't feel like August at all. We're talking 70 for the daytime high, cloudy. It's going to stay cool, scattered showers most of the day. Tonight, we go only down to 60, from 60 to 70. That's not very much change in our temperature from daytime high to overnight low, and the showers will linger into early Monday. Here's a look at our planning forecast. Again, the temperatures on the cool side to start this planning forecast, but warming up finally into the 80s. You just have this rainy period in the early part of the forecast. Sunshine is expected in the middle of the week through Friday.
Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Lauren Casey. It's time for the 6, so let's take a look at what's on tap this week in Indy. Starting with the Indiana State Fair, the food, fun, and rides continue all this week. Each day there's a number of things for you and the entire family to enjoy, including this, the Hendricks Racing Pigs at 11 o'clock each day at the Metro PCS Family Fun Park. Now, the kids may be back in the classroom, but that doesn't mean that summer is over. Workout Wednesdays continue throughout the month of August. Come on out and try it each Wednesday during your lunch hour on Georgia Street. Come take a stroll through downtown Indy and learn something new about our city. On Thursday, Indiana Landmarks and the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission are hosting a Capital City tour and tales. The walk kicks off at 6 o'clock at the plaza between Union Station and the Omni Severin. Backed by popular demand, the Broad Ripple Carnival makes its return this weekend. Celebrate the history of the area with 20 carnival rides, games, food, beer, and community programs. Last year, this carnival brought in more than 4,000 attendants. Turning our attention now to Bloomington, Nick's, the popular pub, will celebrate its 90th birthday with a party. It is family friendly and it'll last from 3 o'clock until 11 p.m. Kirkwood along that block will be closed for this event. And join the folks here at RTV6 for a Step Out Walk for Diabetes. It's a fundraiser to end diabetes, and we need you to come out and walk with us. Come on out to the canal Saturday morning for this great cause. That's what's on tap this week in Indy. Back to you.
This week, we want to close by honoring 2 police officers who we said goodbye to this week.
I didn't want to leave the police department last night. I just really didn't want to leave his side because I know that he wouldn't have left mine.
He was all about giving you grief, but I mean, he was always there at the drop of a dime if you needed something.
For me, it's a huge loss. For our community, it's a huge loss because he advocated for so much of what we need in policing and need more in policing, and that is really seeing people as people.
Just the way that he carried himself, the way he walked, the way he talked, how he treated people is really a lesson for all of us in policing, how to treat people.